So as guitar players, some of the first chords we learn are, the open chords, maybe the bar chords, and then power chords. And those are great and all, but in terms of songwriting, I find that they can be limiting, just because their tonality is so distinct. Maybe at some point you want to write a progression that's like a C to a G to an A minor. You don't necessarily want that kind of sound, like that open chord sound. So in this lesson, I'll start showing you different ways of playing these pretty major and minor chords. Okay, so you can make your progressions sound just a little bit different. That's just one example. So that's what we'll cover here, as well as covering 3 different ways of playing major and minor chords. We'll also cover the surrounding kind of scale tones around the shape of the chord. So that's pretty cool for kind of creating these kind of a more melodic sounding progressions. But it's also great for lead playing and knowing within or surrounding a chord progression what your available options are within the key. Okay. All right, this first bit's going to cover 3 major chord shapes, also known as major triad shapes. The reason we refer to major and minor chords as triads is because they are made up of 3 notes. Okay, so the way that we'll find these shapes is based on where the root note is. There's going to be 3, and the first one will be the C note, the root note on the E string, which is 8th fret, and we are going to play these all in C major because it's a bit easier. It's a great key to start in, as there's no sharps or flats. So yeah, we have C note on the 8th fret of E. That's where we're going to build the first chord off of. The second one's the 15th fret of A, which is also a C note, of course. And then the last one is the 10th fret of the D string, C as well. Okay, so let's start with the one with the root note on the E string. Now, these chords span 4 strings, and they're going to have 2 root notes, the root and octave. So we start with 8th fret on E, 7th fret on A, 5th fret on D, and 5th fret on G. That's one way I recommend playing it, which is melodically, 1 note at a time. Now, if you're thinking, well, you said triads were comprised of 3 notes, but there's actually 4 notes being played. It's actually still comprised of 3 notes because the notes here are C, E, G, and then a repeated C, so the octave. So all together, it actually still makes up 3 notes. It's just a little bit about chord analysis. Okay. So yeah. That's another way of playing C major. So I would play it melodically, like I did before, 1 note at a time, and then form the full shape as well, and strum through it as a chord. Okay. And these are the best fingers to use, by the way. It's and according to this shape, which is pinky, ring, and then the first finger, the index finger, barred across the last 2 strings. So that's the first shape. Let's move on to the second shape, which will be the root note on the A string, 15th fret of A. Okay. So here, this one resembles the previous one we just played, where it starts the same, where we have this 4th finger, 3rd finger, 1st finger shape as before. Because of the nature of the B string and the tuning of the guitar, everything gets pushed up on the B string, 1 fret. So whereas we had the bar here, we actually move that original shape up 1 fret. So it's a little bit different. So it's going to be fourth finger, third finger, first finger, second finger. And the frets are 15 on A, 14 on D, 12 on G, 13 on B. So I'll play it together melodically, ascending and descending. Okay, and then you could form the shape all together and play it as a chord. Okay. You can see where this one comes from. It's actually the open chord shape, but where every note is fretted. There's no open strings. So let's kind of avoid this one. A bit similar to the open chord one. Okay, let's go on to the last shape, which is the root note on the D string. So we have 10th fret with the third finger, 9th fret on G with the second finger, and then 10th fret on B and E barred with the first finger. Then all together. So those are the three major scale shapes, or major chord shapes that you can play. What's cool about all of these is that they're movable. So let's say you're playing a D major chord. All you have to do is find the D note at each one of those different strings and the roots. So meaning D on the E string, D on the A string, D on the D string, and just play the same exact shape. So here's D major root on E, D major root on A, and then D major root on D. It's pretty awesome that they're easily moved to whatever key and whatever chord you'd like. We just keep going, do an F major. Just find the F root note on the E string, and then proceed with the chord shape. F root note on the A string, do that same chord shape, and the F major root on the D string, same chord shape. Now, if you don't know where your notes are, you're still learning that, a good little kind of helper to finding the notes is actually one of those clip-on tuners, or if you have a pedal tuner, maybe kind of just peck around, play the note, see what the tuner says, and try to find the respective note. Or another way is just maybe going online and printing out like a fretboard, like diagram that outlines the notes, and of course using that too. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to each one of these major chord shapes and fill them in with the scale tones surrounding that chord shape. Now we're going to just stick with major and minor. First we'll do the majors, since that's where we're at right now, and just kind of treat the chord that we're playing as the one chord, meaning, you know, if we're in the key of C major, C is the first note of the scale, so that is what we call it, the one chord. So it's kind of, we're treating it according to that information. Yeah, so we have, here's our C major, and if we now just play the scale, we can see how the notes of the scale kind of really overlap with those tones. Now notice the way I play the shape, I kind of stick to a similar fingering as I did with the chord shape. Starting with the pinky there, right? what's cool about playing the chord shape and then the scale scale right after is you can see they have the same bookend. So we're playing everything within one octave, and that's the way to think about it. Since a major scale has seven notes, and then we repeat note 1, and that's what we call the octave. We repeat it at the end after 7 steps. We can kind of consider those the bookends. So you have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then back down, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Okay. So it's a great way to also learn the notes of the fretboard more in a clustered fashion rather than just kind of spread out randomly. So. So yeah, so that's kind of the way to approach this. Is I'd start with the triad. Got to notice those are the chord tones, and then spell out the whole major scale shape. Could even land back to the chord shape. All right, let's move on to the next one. So here, remember we had the root note on the 15th fret. So that's the major triad, and now we just fill in the rest of the scale tones surrounding that shape. Once more. So at the end there, I just kind of did an ascending and descending run of the scale, and then I isolated the chord tones, meaning the notes that are in the C major chord. Right at the end, strummed the C major shape that kind of lives inside of this scale shape. That's a good way of thinking about it. So I like doing that because it's a nice way to kind of bring everything together. So the scale tones, or the entire major scale, the chord tones arpeggiated, one note at a time, and then the chord all together strummed. Yeah. All right, so the last one is going to be the C major, based around this shape. Okay. Once again. Now when you play the notes one at a time of the chord like that, you do have two options, which will kind of deliver the chord in two different approaches. You can hold the chord shape and pick every one note at a time. Kind of leads to a more layered sound because the notes are ringing into each other. Or another option is to make it more melodic, where you only hear one note at a time. So that means just one finger down at once. You could drop it all in to play it. So really the possibilities are endless, just showing you a bunch of things, a bunch of different ways to approach this exercise, and it should keep you plenty busy. Okay, so yeah, that's the idea. It's just kind of going through these three shapes. What's great, it's the same information in different areas of the fretboard. It's a great way of learning the fretboard, kind of, and just playing surrounding a chord shape. What you can do after that is a kind of a creative exercise is think about, so you have the chord shape, replacing notes of that original chord shape with the surrounding chord tones. So we'll use this third shape as an example for this. So one thing you could do, let's say the note we choose to replace is where the second finger is, which is the E, so that's the 9th fret of the G string. Let's say we have the original C chord, let's say we want to replace it. So the way to think about it is think about the scale shape that you played and think about what note is behind it or below it. In this case, it's that 7th fret of the G string. And then you could also think about the note that's right above it, which is the 10th fret of the G string. So those are kind of possible options for replacing the chord to maybe change the quality of the sound. Original chord, here's if we replace it with the 10th fret of G. That sounds pretty neat. And then here's if we replace it with the 7th fret of G, which kind of requires a different fingering. A little harder there. You can always bar that with the 2nd finger. Or just do the 3 notes. But that's the idea, kind of a cool sequence even if you can create a bit of a more melodic sound within your chord progression using the scale tones that surround it. Okay. Let's do one more example. Let's choose a different note of the chord. Maybe let's replace the note on the B string. Okay, so we have the original chord. Now let's replace it with this 10th fret of the B string. So, got a cool sound. So yeah, you can create a nice kind of melodic chord progression using these ideas. So it's really helpful to know, within a shape, kind of, or surrounding the shape, what's available for you to use, kind of to create more melodic interest within your chord progressions. Okay.